Lo, Gjordeg ser min far. Lo, Gjordeg seg min mor, mina søstre og mine brødre. Lår, Gjordeg jeg ser ledningen av mitt folk tilbake til Abegenje. Lo, de kaller til meg. De ber meg tar mitt sted på Asgard, in Halina av Valhalla. Havor din modige kan leve for evig. I hope I pronounced that as closely as possible, because I really don't want to have to go back to 1298 and have Skelga, Helfde, Ranulf, and Leonard walk me through the phonetic pronunciation again. As you might have figured, this is the remastered guide to the Northern Reaches, comprised of Vestland, Ostland, and the Soderfjord Jordons, or Westland, Eastland, and South Fjord for people who know the slightest bit of Swedish. I'm Mr. Welch, and we're going a Viking. Northern Reaches was written in 1988 by Ken Ralston and Elizabeth Danforth with the classic Caldwell art. It was the first Mystara gazetteer that split the book between players and DM's guide. It also included a cardboard section that you could cut out and turn into a Viking village, which is quite rare today because cardboard isn't the sturdiest of materials as you can imagine after 30 years. It had an optional system of personal traits that helped you to find your characters further, though it wasn't well received and was never used again. The Northern Reaches have long been a problem for Mystara and Dungeon Masters because of the numerous contradictions and having to explain where the Norse pantheon suddenly came from when every other immortal was created specifically for Mystara. But here you'll find Odin, Thor, Hel, Loki, and the rest. They have been retconned heavily to fit in the Mystaran mythology, with the latest Great Barrier explanation finally settling on the Norse immortals being reincarnated avatars from gods that tried to get through the barrier while it was still being formed. Odin of Mystara was caused directly by the god Odin, but now they're separate entities after the barrier was completed. There's a few other contradictions, like the Nithyan Empire invading the Northlands and getting turned back by wild gnolls, despite the Nithyans being the creators of gnolls and every other bit of Mystara history. So ignore the part about the gnolls being in the Reaches before the Nithyans got there. The Northmen arrived in what would be the Reaches about 2000 BC with the receding glacier ice. They settled down in the fertile valleys where they thrived until the Nithyans noticed how much food they were growing and fun they were having and promptly invaded. The Northmen were considered a backwards people at the time, still in the Bronze Age. They did have a unique form of magic in the runes, something the Nithyans did their best to eliminate during their centuries of occupation. The Nithyans introduced traditional magics to the Reaches, but once they disappeared, the Northmen turned away from arcane magic, though fortunately various followers of the Aesir preserved the runes for their people. The Reaches have the largest amount of demi-human and humanoid populations of any of the human-settled nations. Dwarves are the most common demi-human and are welcome additions to any settlement. Only the cursed Modrigswork dwarves aren't welcomed by the Northmen, but the nature of their curse means they can't leave their lairs high in the mountains. The Gnomes occupied a section of the mountains that they called the Nation of Falloun, but were driven out after being first enslaved by the Nithyans and then later attacked by kobolds and other humanoids. There was a large number of gnomes still living on the surface, but they longed to return to the caves of their lost homeland. Elves are rare, with legends of the Schattenalfen still lingering, though none have been seen in living memory. Only the Hin are considered strangers to the Northern Reaches, as they are not fond of the mountainous terrain. The mountains of the Reaches are filled with kobolds, trolls, gnolls, and other humanoids that have been driven out of Rockholm and Yalarum. They are a plague on the nations, but as they are firmly entrenched high in the peaks, it makes them all but impossible to exterminate them. This doesn't stop the Northern warriors from attempting to do this every spring after the first thaw. There's also a large population of giants across all three nations and more than a few dragons. There's also a sizable number of fae found deep in the wilderness. Monster attacks on towns and settlements aren't common, but the warrior culture of the Northmen make the more intelligent monsters look for easier prey. In 478 AC, King Canute of Zealand, through alliances, trickery, and violence, united the northern tribes into an actual nation. With the help of his wife Gudrid's diplomacy and the magic of hired wizards, they forced all the Jarls to swear allegiance to their new king. King Canute unleashed the Ostland raiders on nearby targets, specifically settlements in the Helden freeholds, Yalarum, and the Thaietian coast. Soon the raiders were landing on the islands of Minorthad and as far away as the Isle of Dawn. He gave the mainland regions of Ostland to his numerous sons, who founded the many modern cities across what is now Vestland. His sons drove back the trolls and giants, winning the support of the Vestlanders, who saw them more as saviors instead of conquerors. Unfortunately, this attitude wasn't going to last. After the death of King Canute in 526, and then Queen Gudrid in 552, their descendants began to treat Vestland as a source to be exploited, then not as an extension of Ostland. When Ottar the Just of Vestland grew tired of oppressive taxes, he raised the Vestlanders in open revolt. King Finnbogi, Ottar's cousin, launched attacks across the coastal cities of Vestland, resulting in a revolution that would last a full decade, until Finnbogi attempted to besiege Norvik and was captured in a counterattack for his efforts. He was forced to sign a treaty that gave Vestland its freedom, and recognized King Otar as its rightful king. In 950, the Soderfjord Jarldoms were created, though more as a mutual defense pact through the numerous and scattered Jarls in the largely unorganized southern part of the reaches. A mutual agreement between the Jarls gave the region some semblance of a defense pact, and a treaty between the Jarldoms, Vestland, and Yalarum protected caravans that made their way through the nation. They still practiced the raiding from their Ostlandic ancestors, but not on the same scale. Their lack of unification works against the nation, as the Jarls are known to turn on each other if promised wealth or an increase in power. While Ostland has abandoned the region, as it wasn't profitable to begin with, it did cause Ostland to ally with Thyattis to prevent any further regions from breaking away. Occasionally, a Soderfjord Jarl will attempt to unify the nation under him to become the king, but every time this has happened, the infighting has doomed the attempt, and often the Jarl. The three nations tend to behave like bickering siblings. The family lines still run tight through all the nations, and it's not uncommon for someone living in one nation to have kinfolk in the other two. Ostlanders still raid the other nations, and Soderfjorders raid them back. Vestlanders try to modernize their nation and have turned more towards a mercantile system. While their cousins would love to raid Vestlandic shipping, the Vestlanders are still Northmen and know their way around the business end of an axe. Ostland wants to return both nations to its control, but Soderfjord has always rallied together when threatened by Ostland, and Vestland's wealth means they can afford to fortify their ports and build better ships. Most nations tend to group all the northern reaches together in their dealings. The differences of the governments and the people of the three nations are obvious to each other, but they're lost on the populations on most nations outside their borders. They're just known as Northmen in other lands, and don't bother to correct outsiders as they aren't really interested in the finer points of northern culture. Not that the various nations of the reaches care what the other nations think, except maybe the Vestlandic merchants, who are tired of potential customers flinching when they make sudden moves. Ostland is the most politically stable of the Northlands, the only one with a strong king who is in complete control of all of the nation. It is an island nation, consisting of 4 primary islands with several smaller islands of little importance. Noslo is the largest of the 4, larger than the other 3 combined. As expected, this is where the capital is found, along with the majority of the population. It is known for having some of the best soil in the region, which means the island is largely self-sustaining. Kalslo Island is the next largest. It's known for its independent streak, as the population there largely wants to be left alone. They've never been fully trusted by other Ostlanders because of this, especially as they prefer to worship Frey and Freya instead of Odin and the other northern immortals. The island is known for its large number of monasteries, and swaths of the island are considered sacred ground by Ostlanders. Osterslo and Kunslo Islands are barely populated, and their population is just fishers and whalers. They aren't a friendly type. Visitors are warned away, and trespassers are attacked on sight. Ostland's political scene revolves around the king and a stable line of succession. Unlike other kingdoms, the transfer of power is not always through family lines. Noble families send their children to live in the capital of Zeeburg to serve in the court of the king. If the king is without heirs, he will pick his successor from the scions serving in his court. In rare situations, the king will even adopt another noble's child to be his heir, rather than name one of his own children to be king. It's an unusual method, but it has served Ostland for centuries. The current king, Hord Darkeye, is an aging king who has prospered, serving as a pirate and occasional mercenary for Thyattis. His new wife has given him 2 sons, and he's content to live out his days watching those sons grow up. His young wife is also teaching her children to modernize the backwards Ostland, while Hord's spiritual advisor is trying to convince the boys to maintain the old ways. The current threat to Ostland is the growing schism between Queen Ursa and the Goatee of Odin that advises the king, Asgrim the Bowed. Asgrim is encouraging King Hord to allow him to remove the Ostman clan of Kalslo and tear down the temples to Frey and Freya, allowing them to plunder the tombs of the ancient kings on the island. Ursa is attempting to persuade the Ostman clan to ally with her so she can preserve the nation. The Ostmanners themselves have sought assistance from the other northern nations, and are willing to fight to protect their culture, even if it means secession. Ursa also encourages Hord to strengthen his ties with Thyattis and increase the pace of the Ostlandic colonization on the Isle of Dawn, though that is something that will anger the Alphatians. Making things worse is King Hord doesn't have many years left, and that is not a secret to anyone. His sons are too young to rule, so the regent will be the power behind the throne for at least a decade, and both Ursa and Asgrim are fighting for that position behind the scenes. Vestland is the most modern of the northern reaches, having turned its back on its violent past and becoming a mercantile power in its own right. Only about half the nation is under control of the government, with large portions of the interior in control of various humanoid tribes or monsters. Vestland has trade routes into Rockholm, Ethengar, Soderfjord, and Yalarum, which they guard fiercely with all the internal threats to their caravans. They have a friendly relationship with Soderfjord compared to the antagonistic Ostland, though Soderfjord's chaotic nature can change that relationship instantly. Despite Vestland's abandonment of its raiding past, the nation's aggressive defense of its trade routes mean the warrior clans never lack for battle. King Harald Gudmundsson rules Vestland with the help of the Royal Council, which includes jarls, merchants, clergy, and representatives of the freeholders. Vestland provides agency to all aspects of its population, as the king knows that a problem that affects one part of the nation might not affect another. Vestlanders are known for being incredibly patriotic, as the agency provided by the Royal Council has resulted in a strong national pride. It doesn't have a standing army, at least in an offensive capacity. The nation isn't considered a threat by their neighbors because of their lack of aggression. However, the nation has a strong defensive force called the Home Guard. This group is known for its competency and its prowess, as they know how to use their natural terrain to their advantage. Their experience, gained from centuries as raiders, has given them training as a rapid response force, both across the ground and by sea. Attacking one village will result in a spirited defense by their Home Guard, who will be quickly reinforced by nearby units. Because of this, an invasion of Vestland is considered too costly to attempt by outsiders. The Soderfjord Jarldoms is the youngest of the nations in the known world, and is also considered by many to be the weakest. It's a loose alliance of jarls, who meet 2 weeks out of the year to decide the policies of their nation, though most of that time is actually spent arguing over trivial matters. They have no standing army, only the guards of the individual jarls. There is no king, no formal government. In fact, anytime a jarl has decided to become king, it has triggered one of Soderfjord's countless civil wars. 50 years ago, Soderfjord agreed on the Nordhatar Defense League, which forged the region into an actual nation. It established the war leader, who only has the power to raise a defensive force to protect the region, but no other duties past that. The Council of the Great Jarls meets twice a year to pass new laws, but has no method of enforcing these laws from jarldom to jarldom. To make matters worse, the jarls are known to be treacherous, with many falling under the sway of Ostland or Thiatis. Jarls can be played off of each other, and jarldoms are merged into more powerful ones or split into smaller ones when family members feud over power. The nation is a complete mess. Every jarl keeps his own laws. While slavery is illegal across the nation, numerous jarls just changed the name to bondsmen and kept on with the practice. The only thing going for it, and the only reason it hasn't been conquered, is that the land is minerally poor, but fiercely defended. Ostlanders raid it with regularity. Phaeacian slavers will grab whoever they can with impunity. But an actual invasion of the nation would unify the jarls, and the years of constant feuding and civil wars have turned Soderfjorders into fearsome and veteran warriors. The fact they don't have a single target for their aggression is the only thing that keeps them from living up to their potential. The northern reaches also contain the fallen kingdom of Falloun, the homeland of the Gnomes. The Falloun Gnomes were the most technologically advanced of all the races before their conquest, first by the Nithians and later by the humanoid hordes, specifically kobolds. Artifacts of gnomish design can still be found there, ranging from common household items like musical instruments or fire starters, all the way up to working miniature printing presses and pocket watches. The underground nation is overrun with kobolds, and is mostly covered with flowstone that has closed off many of the gnomish buildings. The kobolds that populate the region now view themselves as the rightful conquerors and see humans as envious and cowardly. The kobolds have gained some degree of knowledge about the captured gnomish devices, and a few have begun making crude imitations of the weapons. The gnomes, of course, would love to have their homeland back, and the merciless genocide of hundreds of thousands of kobolds living there now is a sacrifice the gnomes would be more than willing to make. The humans of Vestland and Ostland view the kobolds as a menace, but the difficulty of even reaching the mountains of Falloun in force means full-blown confrontation is highly unlikely. The northern reaches have powerful divine magics that are unknown outside the borders of the region. The key theme of northern magic is what price power. None of the northern magics come without a cost. When the Nithians first invaded and began exterminating anyone who possessed magical powers, the Aesir, the northern immortals, gave knowledge of divine power to a group called the Volva, or the Wise Women. They retreated into the mountains and wildernesses of the reaches, safe from the Nithian patrols. They protected the secrets of the runes and the sacred ways of the Godi from those that would exploit or destroy it. They kept the history of the early Ostlanders, as well as religious rituals and the very culture of the original Northmen. They were given the secrets of things best left unknown by the immortals, in case the region that was ever threatened again by outsiders. Though few in number today, they are greatly respected and have the ear of many a jarl and even both kings, though the secrets they hold are not ones people want to hear often. Runic magic is unique to the Reaches. The knowledge of how to create them is known only to wise women and certain Godar, and for good reason. The act of instilling a rune on a recipient is often fatal to the bearer of the rune, as mortals were not meant to handle the power of the immortals. Even for those that survive, their health is permanently damaged and their constitution is weakened. Each rune has a unique set of powers devoted to it, anything from increased strength, luck, protection, knowledge, or skills. The list is exhaustive, and gaining all the runes is impossible. Even getting the rune you want to manifest is difficult. It all depends on the faith of the Godi creating it and the will of the immortals granting the power. The knowledge of the runes is kept closely guarded. The wizards of Glantria or Alphatia would pay us any amount of gold or magic to know their secrets. Because of this, those with the knowledge or those possessing a rune will defend that secret to the death. The runes fade after the death of the bearer, meaning killing a rune bearer is pointless, and capturing someone worthy of earning a rune typically results in a battle to the death. The northern reaches are a constant source for adventure, and anyone looking to carve out a name for themselves. While Ostland is largely settled, Vestland and Soderfjord have large areas of untamed wilderness filled with all sorts of monsters. Soderfjord in particular has constant need for anybody capable of wielding a sword with all their constant internal conflict. Ostland raids their neighbors with impunity, and are currently trying to colonize contested areas on the Isle of Dawn, in direct conflict with Alphatia. If you can swing a sword, someone in the northern reaches has a job for you. Though wizards are distrusted across the reaches, the Jarls of Soderfjord will take any help they can get with their constant struggles. Vestland is becoming more open, and Ostland needs wizards in their struggles against the Alphatians. For players coming from outside the reaches, they have numerous opportunities for both adventure and advancement. Northerners are suspicious at first of outsiders, but they warm quickly to those that prove themselves. Anyone that is shown to be capable will have a place in the courts of the king and the Jarls. The Gnomes are amassing a fortune to hire mercenaries to retake Falloun, and are more than ready to bring the horrors of Verdun to the humanoid hordes to reclaim what was theirs. Anyone willing to kill trolls or giants will find a warm welcome in the feast halls, no matter the country. If you can kill the enemies of the Northlanders, you will always find a warm fire to greet you. So why play a Northlander? They're fragmented, they're warlike, they're not exactly known for their diplomatic nature. However, they are really good at stabbing people, a skill that they have learned to market. Their sailing skills are second only to the Irendi, and their love of glory and battle means you are never going to have to worry about leaving you behind to save their own skins. Plus, you're playing a bloody Viking, hefting hefty axes, wielding ancient magics, seeking a glorious death in battle to make your ancestors proud, is a classic character type, mainly because it's a blast to play. Next remaster will be the Five Shires, or why Mystara and Halflings make every other settings version look like children. Until then, remember, Jorn Dishborn der Ritter Gittergu, Jorn Desh de Borndesh, de bork bork bork.